Well, Sweden kicking out 80,000 refugees who arrived in their country last year. Their applications have since been rejected, and officials say they just simply cannot accept them. Sweden has taken the lead on accepting refugees in Europe with generous benefits. They've taken more than 160,000 in the year 2015 alone. Well, that number has since plummeted since new photo ID checks went into place this month.
Once a shining example of social welfare and peaceful cohabitation, Sweden had great difficulty integrating a lot of immigrants. This problem, combined with growing crime rates and financial pressures, changed Sweden from an open country to one struggling with immigration's reality.
Because don't want to stay in Denmark. We don't, all this, no Denmark.
What do you want?
Sweden.
There's 500 kilometers to Sweden.
Okay, no problem.
How do you think you can walk to Sweden 500 kilometers?
We work from Syria to here, no problem.
The nation's reaction has been to tighten immigration policies, which has had a significant impact on its political and social scene. Historically, Sweden's high-performance, export-oriented economy was bolstered by a stable parliamentary democracy and broad social agreement, hence reflecting its reputation.
For anybody outside of Sweden, could you paint a picture as to how serious the situation that we're now seeing is?
It's been quite serious for a couple of years when it comes to the level of organization with the criminal gangs and their use of threat and violence. So the shootings in Sweden since pretty much 2015 has increased every year for somewhere around 20 up to 62, and the level of bombings as well. Compared to all the other Nordic countries, if we have something like 60.
The country was greatly satisfied with its low crime rates, social and gender equality, first-rate education, and healthcare. But Sweden has seen a startling change recently, with an increasing incidence of bombs and gang-related violence. Many of these events have been connected to the nation's poor, efficient integration of its immigrant population.
The situation is untenable, not only for those seeking asylum, but for officials and for all people who place their trust in the social system.
The matter attracted worldwide notice in 2017 when questions over Sweden's open-door immigration policy were underlined. A major political change came with the emergence of the right-wing Sweden Democrats, a party that profited from popular worries about integration, crime, and economic constraints. The second largest party in parliament, the Sweden Democrats' popularity surged to 20.6% in the most recent elections. This increase has driven the Swedish government towards stricter immigration laws, including border inspections and the building of deportation camps.
As you just heard, the Sweden Democrats could be a key kingmaker after all of the votes are counted in Sweden's election. Here in theCUBE, we'll take a closer look at its leader and the direction of the party in recent years. So this is the party's main man. His name is Jimmie Åkesson. He became the leader of the party in 2005 when he was just in his mid-20s. He wanted to change the party. He was part of its modernizing wing. And it's clear to see in this image.
Created in 1988, the Sweden Democrats have changed significantly under Jimmie Åkesson's direction since 2005. Especially with regard to immigration, the party has veered from its extreme past to take a more populist posture. Many Swedish voters, who are growingly worried about the difficulties presented by significant immigration, have connected with this change.
If Sweden wants any chance at saving their country, saving their future, they must deport all Islamic asylum seekers back to their country.
Swedes have voiced annoyance at how immigration affects their nation's social assistance programs and security systems. Rising crime rates, gang violence, and bombs make many people believe Sweden is no longer secure. Once a cause of national pride, the welfare state is today considered by some as overburdened by immigrant immigration. A feeling of social fragmentation results from schools, hospitals, and homes trying to meet the rising demand.
The result of the Swedish election is on a knife edge. The biggest winner of election night is Jimmie Åkesson, the leader of the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats Party. With partial...
The rising fear about these problems helps to explain the rise of the Sweden Democrats. Once seen as extreme, the party's anti-immigration posture has become mainstream and shapes right-wing bloc policies, allowing them to narrowly defeat the center-left coalition. Using public displays and direct activities to deter further immigration, the Swedish Democrats have not held back from contentious strategies to forward their cause.
In the last 10 years, 67% of asylum seekers in Europe have been male. 67%. And 80% of them have been under...
Although Sweden is not the only country seeing this increase in nationalism and populism, this is a general European trend. Reflecting a general disappointment with conventional political institutions and a need for tougher immigration policies, far-right groups throughout Europe have attracted significant support. Once a bulwark of tolerance and openness, Sweden has been dramatically changed by these influences. Sweden has responded to the mounting difficulties by implementing a set of strict revisions to its immigration laws. Establishing reception facilities for asylum seekers helps them concentrate on processing and lodging, therefore restricting their freedom of movement. This action is meant to control migration more efficiently, thus guaranteeing that asylum seekers cannot stay wherever they choose. Furthermore, it is put up for asylum seekers whose applications have been denied at repatriation centers, thereby enabling their return to their nations. These developments have caused much debate within Sweden. Fearing the compromise of Sweden's humanitarian ideals, some contend that the new rules are cruel and immoral. A deeply split public opinion exists. Some applaud the administration for its bold posture, while others worry about the consequences of the nation's long-standing dedication to human rights.
Well, that is one of many discussions going on right now. I think it's extremely important to safeguard that people that actually do enter the EU are people entitled to do that. We cannot continue a situation where people without permits simply travel through Europe and to countries and live in under circumstances that are not acceptable. So this is one of the converging, I would say, views in Europe right now, that we simply have to do something about that. So I think we can conclude a good package.
Notwithstanding these difficulties, Sweden's new migration rules are starting to show benefits. Asylum applicants have dropped drastically, and the administration projects that trend to continue. Sweden wants to build a fair and sustainable migration system by centralizing the asylum procedure and stressing quick returns. The development of Sweden's immigration policy is far from finished. The nation's previously friendly refugee policies were notably broken when it decided to impose strict identification checks on all arriving Danish traffic in January 2016. This action followed an unheard-of increase in refugee applications in 2015, of which Sweden received over 160,000. The sheer volume of immigrants taxed Sweden's resources to the breaking point, and local governments battled to handle the rising population.
In my city, we see the people dying, we see people killed, yes. Everyone in Syria dream to coming here.
I feel saved. I feel I am a person, yeah, and I can give life to my daughter.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of this?
It's a paradise.
Announced a set of policy reforms in the fall of 2015, the Swedish government faced an unsustainable scenario and a growingly dubious public. These steps included proposals to create specialized receiving facilities, a stricter attitude toward turned-down applicants, and faster processing timeframes for asylum claims. Emphasizing growing detention capacity and enabling the repatriation of unsuccessful asylum seekers, the administration also devoted large sums to other facets of migration policy. For Sweden, as well as for the larger European setting, this policy review has had a notable influence. Sweden has shown a strong will to match those of its neighbors by modifying its asylum rules to minimal EU criteria and phasing out its more liberal clauses. Other member states facing comparable difficulties have noticed this action. Sweden's policy change is clearly having social and cultural consequences as it negotiates this new reality. Rising inequality and social cohesiveness are causing increasing worry. Several Swedes find the speed and scope of demographic change unsettling. Though few members of the majority population feel excluded, there are indications of shifting views as more people believe the immigrant population is erasing Swedish values and way of life. The experience of Sweden functions as a microcosm for the larger European immigration debate. Once praised as a shining example of progressive policies, the Swedish model now finds itself at a crossroads. The nation has to strike a compromise between its dedication to human rights and the very genuine social and financial demands associated with significant migration. This balancing act will affect not only Sweden, but also Europe in general. Other countries dealing with comparable problems will carefully observe Sweden's actions and results as it keeps tackling these difficulties. The road Sweden decides upon might teach other nations trying to control immigration useful lessons on how to preserve humanitarian principles and societal stability. The consequences of Sweden's strategy will be felt for the next generations, thus influencing immigration policy both within and outside of Europe.
Learning the language, getting information about social services, housing and employment is what migrants and refugees seek at the Caritas Welcome Centre in Stockholm. The Nordic country has a long tradition of welcoming foreigners, but something has changed, says the organisation's managing director.
The change in Swedish policy has also resulted in more outside criticism. Sweden's policies and results are carefully watched by nations both within and outside of the European Union. The success of Sweden's new laws might affect immigration discussions and policy choices in other countries with comparable problems.
Most of the surveys shows about 60% of the population were positive towards migration until a few years ago, and then the whole thing changed. And partly also the whole negative narrative by political leadership making a story about connecting migration with all the criminality and what all went wrong in the society, blaming everything to migrants and migrants.
Problems of national identity and cultural preservation are closely entwined with the discussion over immigration in Sweden. Many Swedes are wondering what it means to be Swedish in a nation undergoing fast transformation. This has spurred a national debate on values, customs, and the direction the country should be headed. The flood of immigrants has had an especially strong impact on Swedish educational institutions. Schools in places with lots of immigrant students need help to provide sufficient tools and assistance. This has raised questions over educational fairness as well as the long-term futures of these kids. Moreover, under pressure are healthcare systems. Immigrant-dense hospitals and clinics claim to be overburdened, which affects the general quality of treatment for all the locals. This has spurred discussions about the sustainability of the Swedish healthcare model and resource allocation. A major problem now is housing scarcity. The demand for reasonably priced homes has surged with the immigration wave, which has driven more competitiveness and higher pricing. This has impacted long-time inhabitants as well as newcomers, hence fueling social conflict and discontent. Immigration's economic effects are many. Some contend that by filling labor shortages, immigrants boost the economy, while others say the expenses of integrating recent immigrants are too great. The political conversation in Sweden revolves mostly around this argument. The debate on immigration has revolved mostly around the increase in crime rates, especially with gang violence. High-profile events have stoked public anxiety and demanded more strict law enforcement actions. The government has responded with more police and more stringent fines for offenses connected to gangs.
In spite of the fact that pressure will come from the European Parliament and some member states, namely Italy, the Swedish government is clearly saying they don't expect to create much consensus about migration policy. They will try their best in the next EU summit, and probably it will be to Spain to conduct the work in the second.
Furthermore, Sweden's immigration policy affects its connections with other EU members. The policy changes of the nation fit a larger trend toward more stringent immigration laws all over Europe. This involves the future of the Schengen area as well as EU immigration policy.
We all know that with the new government in place, it's like goodbye. Sweden is full. We don't need people, and which is unfortunate because Sweden was a very welcoming and generous country. But as the year goes by, the immigration laws are becoming very tougher and tougher, and yeah, it's unfortunate. I would just don't come because it's not more welcoming.
Immigration has important cultural ramifications. Although Sweden has always been noted for its cultural homogeneity, the immigration wave has produced a more varied society. Because diverse cultural standards and values must coexist, this variety presents both challenges and richness. The immigration discussion has fundamentally changed the political scene in Sweden. The Sweden Democrats' ascent and its impact on mainstream politics have shifted the political center of gravity in the nation to the right. This affects the next elections as well as policy choices. The public view on immigration in Sweden is very split. Although some Swedes like the government's stricter immigration policy, others worry that it runs against the nation's humanitarian values. The political scene reflects this split, which shapes policy making.
You have to keep it on a social acceptable level with decent wages, etc. And there's a reform we just now have introduced in Sweden to be clear that it's...
Sweden's new immigration laws have long-term consequences that are yet to be fully appreciated. The effects on social cohesiveness, economic stability, and cultural integration will become evident as the nation keeps applying these reforms. The outcome of these policies, either successful or unsuccessful, will have major consequences for Sweden's future. Sweden's immigration history emphasizes the difficulties and complexity of assimilating significant numbers of immigrants. The nation's path from an open model to one of limitation provides insightful insights for other countries dealing with comparable problems. The international world will keenly observe Sweden's response as the balance between upholding humanitarian standards and tackling pragmatic issues is a thin one.